the first time in a long time. Thank you for coming out on this sweltering evening. So for the consent agenda, we don't have any previous minutes. Do I still need a motion? I don't think I do. There's nothing to accept. Yeah. Okay, and I'm going to move forward with the preview and prioritization as we have it laid out. So that does bring us to our recognition of visitors and the public comment window. So, Zach, we have Zachariah Messier here. Messier.
So my name is Zach Messier. As you guys just heard, I have several young kids that go to this school, and I had to pull them out this year because the mask mandate. My kid overheated and almost had heat stroke at recess last year. Couldn't breathe. I wasn't going to abide by this, and the fact that we're even discussing the fact of having masks again is ridiculous. There's a 98% survival rate of this COVID, and it's no more different than any other flu that you get any other time of the year. That's basically all I came here to say. The statistics prove completely contradictory to everything that everybody's trying to push, and I just don't understand why we're even considering it. Thank you.
When the mic being turned up, I'm getting attention my husband can barely hear on this.
We're having a little technical difficulty because it's not how we usually do it. So maybe if people, I don't know how you all feel about this, but if they could stand maybe closer to that thing with the ball on top, and then I think that's where the sound's coming from for the people online, correct, Courtney?
Yes.
Okay.
This sound will be better for the recording. We can't turn up the mic up, but I've tried. It's just not working on this computer. It's a different computer I'm trying to use. But can you hear myself speak? Okay, so you might have to come up because for me you can hear because I'm right here.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable with that. Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, everybody.
No, doing the best we can. It's good. Thank you. So Chelsea, this Chelsea Gilbert.
Yes. Oh, no, that can raise my neck. Yes.
Members of the school board, I'm here before you as a mother, a wife, and a community member. The most important job I have is to be the voice for my children, to protect them, to fight for their physical, emotional, and psychological well-being. Our children have rights, the same rights as we do, life, liberty, and happiness. I think society seems to forget that our children have these rights. One of the most important values we teach our kids is personal boundaries. We teach them that they have control over their body. We drill into society, my body, my choice. We have gone backwards. Now we are telling our kids that they have zero control over their body. Their body is no longer their choice, even if they're uncomfortable. Has anyone here ever asked a child how the mask makes them feel? No, because no one has stopped to think about their feelings.
Oh.
If you look back in history, masks were used for submission. This is a terrifying precedent being set. What else will kids comply with because some adult told them they had to? There's no longer a medical state of emergency. Absent the state of emergency, mandates such as masks cannot be enforced. The AOE told me this personally. That is why they could not require them in their guidance. Back when the state of emergency was lifted, NBC 5 also reported that things would look different in the summer and into the fall. Schools can no longer require the masks. They can recommend them. Kids have been at summer camp and school without a mask. Now all of a sudden we want to cause more confusion for our kids. They've had enough and we've had enough. The constant flip-flopping and contradictory mandates are mentally draining. The CDC, the AOE, the Department of Health do not make laws. Mandates are also not laws. Masks a Florida appeals court ruled that mask mandates are actually unconstitutional and illegal. Masks are not even effective. It says on the packaging, this mask is designed for general sanitary purposes. It is not for medical use. This mask is not proven to reduce the transmission of disease. Prolonged mask use causes CO2 inhalation, which can lead to brain damage. Dr. Fauci himself has stated in his released emails, the typical mask you buy in a drugstore is not really effective in keeping out the virus, which is small enough to pass through the material. We need to think about the psychological effects of forced masking. When did mental health become less important than physical health? My daughter was in outpatient counseling as well as school counseling all last year. She cried to me and her anxiety was out of control. Why? Because fear was instilled in her through school. It was terrifying for her every time she got to school and needed her temp checked and mask forced on her. She cried every single morning. Her feelings are valid. She was uncomfortable, and forcing your child to do something they're uncomfortable with is abuse. My other daughter is 9 years old. She wears glasses. Every tip and trick that she was told to use for the masks did not work. And she ended up not wearing her glasses last year and coming home with headaches every single day. Last year, we were told if our kids refused to wear a mask, they'd have to go virtual because there was a state mandate. There's no mandate this year, so what will happen if they refuse to wear one? Will they be denied their right to public education? Will they be discriminated against and forced into virtual learning? Are we really going to segregate our children? I'm not asking you to ban masks. I'm simply requesting that schools allow parents to be parents. Allow parents and kids the freedom to choose what is right for them and make them optional. Recommendations are fine because that allows the child their right to decide what they're comfortable with. I'm asking you to please stand up for our children and show our children that their human rights and feelings are valid.
Thank you. Amy, would you like to go?
Hi, my name is Amy Wood. I'm a parent of 2 Richford High School students and 1 at Richford Elementary School. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what I was going to say. She's already said, so I'm not going to repeat it. But I just want the board and the community to know that I too am opposed to a mask mandate. We're parents. Let us make the choice for our kids. It's not even a state mandate at this point. And I guess my biggest question, should you decide to mandate them, is what happens if we refuse? Thank you.
Amy, what happens? What was
What happens if we refuse?
Okay, thank you. Melissa?
This was my first year teaching second grade this year, and we taught with masks all year, and I did notice the kids get used to it throughout the year, but as the year came to a close and the governor lifted the mask mandate, there was so much rejoicing over that, and it is very hard to teach and not have children see your mouth, so I would recommend that it be a choice as well, because I think that having the mask come off to be able to teach and to have children learn sounds is really important. Glasses wearers will struggle as well, so I am in favor of not having it be mandated, having a choice as well, from a teacher perspective and as a parent as well. I think it would be hard on the kids because they had all summer long at summer camp without masks, and to go back to it again would be very challenging. So that's why.
Do you want to see if Michael, or no, I'm sorry, yeah, Melissa's husband is, Jim is there, and Michael, if they would like to share anything further?
Michael or Jim, would you like to share anything? Michael or Jim, would you like to say anything? Sorry, this is usually much louder. I promise.
We got it.
Okay.
Yeah. Listen intently. It was audible. Okay, so that's everyone who's in the waiting room on Zoom. Oh.
Yes, we can. I'm moving the microphone closer. Just
Hey, Jim, can you speak as loud as you can?
And so, from my perspective, if there is no longer a reason to wear the mask as mandated by CDC, then we should not be forcing the kids to wear masks in school. And that's all for me.
Thank you.
well, bands are sort of doing it, I think.
All right. I appreciate everyone's comments. Thank you so much for taking the time to come in and share your feelings. And I certainly hear a lot of passion and concern in your statements. So thank you so much for that. And certainly the mask conversation is part of why we're here, but more broadly, we're here because we need to kind of have a conversation with Lynn about moving forward into the school year, which is right upon us. What our policies are going to look like related to COVID, because we are no longer under the state of emergency. We now need to kind of figure out what authority Lynn has to adjust according to the guidance that comes from the state level, from the AOE, and more kind of tangentially from the CDC, although I think it is less relevant because that's a national view and Vermont is in a different situation in some ways from the rest of the country right now. But that said, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn and we will figure out about this piece around granting Lynn the authority to in real time make decisions based on the state guidance for the schools in the FNESU.
So I want to set a little context first. So last year, we started the year, we really went into a state of emergency partway through the year before. So we're entering into our third year with the pandemic. What's different now is we were under a state of emergency from March of 2020 or whenever, I don't remember the exact date that was decided, until June 15th of this year. Under the state of emergency, the Secretary of Education had the regulatory authority to make mandates for schools that we were required to follow. So in the decision-making process last year, there wasn't a lot of choice about what we follow because it was explicitly spelled out. I certainly acknowledge some of the things that I heard about how hard and frustrating it is to see the guidance go from here today to there tomorrow and back. And we've seen that happen over the course of the last, I think we're at like 17 months now. So we're all pretty fatigued. I think that is, no matter what you think about masks, we're all very fatigued. So what is different now is that the state of emergency has ended. So the secretary does not have the same regulatory authority to make a mandate on behalf of schools. So what is happening now is that the Agency of Education, in connection, in partnership with the Vermont Department of Health, they're going to be making recommendations for schools. So what I know now about, I'll just say that not that we're making the masking decision per se, but this is the first example of what we've had to deal with so far. So when the agency released this guidance, this is the first of it that has not had the regulatory authority. So it literally states, we recommend that you require, and then it outlines what the expectations are. And it is masking to start the year until you reach a certain level of vaccinated, of students who are eligible for vaccine, until they reach a certain level of vaccination. Once you hit that percentage, the recommendation currently states that the masking will no longer be required. So I know that that is, for some people, they understand that and they recognize that it's going to be data driven. For others, it feels frustrating for a variety of reasons. The reality is, Mary, you kind of pointed to this, it is, Vermont is in a different landscape in some ways than other parts of the country. So the CDC has actually said they believe that universal masking in schools should be required right now. And I think that what we have heard from the Department of Ed and from the Agency of Education and the Department of Health is that they don't feel we have to be as restrictive as the CDC right now, because some of those states have very low vaccination rates and really high infection rates. And some of those schools are just going back for the first time since March of 2020. So Vermont's in a different context right now. We've been in school for a whole year. School didn't look exactly normal last year, but we were able to have our students in school for the whole year. So the state level epidemiologists, medical professionals, and the governor and the secretary work together to say, in Vermont's context, we think that we could be less restrictive than the national guidance, but we still think that we need to have some restrictions around masking to protect our students. And this definitely is something that is different than what we thought it would be in June. In June, I think we all kind of expected there's a pretty good shot we're going to be able to start the school year, given where the virus was in June. There's a pretty good shot we're going to be able to start in a relatively normal way. And then the reality is the Delta variant raised its head over the summer, and those infection rates have been climbing. Recently, the CDC released information that I think it's Chittenden County, Franklin County, and Essex County have been identified as having the most substantial spread of virus right now. So we're at a high level of risk right now in our counties. So we're in a place where this is a whole new world because we've not had to make these decisions at this level. So what I'm asking for the board to have a conversation about tonight is, how do you want me to handle these situations? Because you know from our work last year, there were literally hundreds of decisions, and that might be an underestimation, that had to happen on a really regular, rapid, just rapidly throughout the year last year. And so you did grant me the authority through policy to be making those decisions. So I'm asking you tonight, how do you want me to handle these situations as they come up in terms of what the recommendations are going to look like from the state? So that's the conversation here, not necessarily to decide masking or no masking, but in general, as we get hit with these 100 decisions that are probably coming ahead, because every bit of the decision creates questions about another piece of it. If we do this, then what happens in this part of the school? And if we do this, then what happens here? So every decision results in multiple other decisions. So I need some guidance, because I was not anticipating that the public health, the brunt of the public health decision making was going to fall at the local level. I will, sorry, just add one more thing. I too heard the passion in everybody's, message today, and I completely understand it. My inbox has had other messages that have been just as passionate, and it's so clear that people here today care deeply. They love their children. They're the most important people in their lives, and as a mom, I totally get that, and I can empathize with that. And I'll just say, from my perspective, I feel like we've been placed right in the middle of the most challenging decision probably any of us have ever had to make, because my inbox has also been filled with people who are saying, if you don't follow this guidance, if you choose to be less restrictive, you are putting my child's life at risk. So we have heard today of the people who are here that the argument for no mask, and at the same time, I'm also fielding those arguments for the people who, for whatever reason, whether or not they're someone in their home or their child has some sort of high risk condition. People are passionate on both sides of this issue.
Do we have a sense of what other superintendents are doing, maybe specifically in the counties that you named? And I know, I'm trying to remember, I think it was like a year ago, but you had talked about how kind of the north, I felt like there was a lot of unity within sort of like the Northwest, I don't know, it was like Addison, Champlain Valley,
yeah.
Thank you. Of everybody kind of like trying to be on the same page. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but I'm just curious, how other superintendents are dealing with being tasked with making public health decisions, like you said.
So it's August, what is it, the 10th? 11th. It's August 11th. So this feels not good for so many reasons, and one of them is where we are with the calendar and how soon kids are coming, right? So we didn't get this guidance until last Thursday, so I have met with my counterparts a couple of times since then. I've met with a state level group of superintendents as well, and most of them are going through a really similar process like this. There are lots of emergency meetings that have been called all over the state. Some of them already had regularly scheduled meetings, so they're having these conversations. I have not yet heard definitively that anyone has chosen to go less restrictive. I have heard that some people are choosing to follow the guidance as it's coming from the public health experts. And I've also heard that there have been some districts who have been having conversations about being more restrictive because of the worry of the variant and not wanting to drop the mask once they get to a certain level of vaccination for eligible students. So it really is it's a debate going on right now.
And just for clarity's sake, if eligible students, so if you're talking about high school, reach an 80% threshold, then you could be less restrictive than the guidance.
Though the guidance would tell you.
The guidance would tell you.
So this is the tricky part, because sometimes it feels like the sand shifts beneath your toes, because this is what the guidance says today. And so the intention right now is once you hit that 80% threshold, people have lots of questions about how are you getting the 80% data? How are you going to know? And I don't know that yet. There's more information that we're all missing. So that's one piece that the state has said that they'll let us know soon how we're going to be measuring that. So the guidance says to at that point become less restrictive and let the masks come down.
Okay.
What they have been silent on so far is what do you do in systems that have a mix of children under 12 and children over 12. So I'm not sure yet what that would look like in a K-8 school in our context, and I know other people in the state are looking for what does that mean for a K-12 school as well.
The other thing I think is important to bring up is that we don't have any idea what contact tracing is going to look like, right? So we don't know what's going to happen if we have a positive in school this year. Quarantine everybody. And, none of that stuff is. So anyway, contact tracing, I think, is pretty unclear to me of what's going to happen. So if we have a positive child or teacher in school, what happens at that point in time? Do we treat vaccinated the same as unvaccinated kids? None of that type of thing is particularly clear.
So you're right. We've been waiting for that piece of information. I did get an email forwarded to me. It's not come through my channels yet, but I think that something's been released to some of the health professionals. So I think that there's a metrics. I literally got it when I was driving here, so I haven't been able to look at it yet. But I think that what the agency and VDH are trying to say is, we get the frustration, is what I've heard in some of the communications, and the desire to be in a place where we can take down the masks for all students. And at the same time, I think that the goal is to be 5 days in person for all students this year and to maintain operations. So I think that they have said they're not going to be recommending that we require anything around distancing at this time, or group sizes or anything like that. But again, depending on decisions, they're logistical decisions that then have to be made about a lot of different factors. So I think that that does play in, like what's going to happen if there's a positive in a classroom and you're not distancing and you're not requiring kids to, like last year we were so strict in the classrooms. Who has to quarantine if there's a positive? How will they identify that is another piece of the puzzle that we have to figure out. So we have to look at that in terms of our goal of maintaining operations as well. That's to be a consideration.
And so there's the possibility too, like if teachers fell ill and they're out sick and now we don't have staff for say a week or so if they were ill, I mean, classes could go remote or things could.
I don't know the answer to that because our guidance so far has not really indicated that we would be shifting in and out of remote learning during the year like we were last year. So what we've been told so far is that if someone has to quarantine, we'll treat it like any other absence. So we would send work and work to catch them up when they return. I'll be honest, I do still have concerns about staffing shortages. We had a really small substitute teacher pool last year. A lot of people dropped off the pool because they were a little worried about the virus, and so we were bare bones. And I got a report this morning from my office because we're heading into a substitute teacher training in a couple of weeks, and we're down 12 substitute teachers because we've actually hired those people in our schools. So it's a double-edged sword. We're happy to take them on, but we've had a push for people to apply to substitute teaching. We've not seen, I think since the last time we advertised, we've only seen a few candidates.
So, I mean, I think that because we're going to have this kind of trickle in of guidance that is constantly kind of reflecting the moment, like capturing a moment in time, it does kind of speak to Lynn's ability and need to have the ability to be super responsive with following the guidance. And we don't have epidemiologists and public health people that work for our organization. And so we're relying on the knowledge at the Department of Health and coming from the state and coming from the experts at that level. And it seems like the terrain is a little unknown here with the Delta variant and what that is going to look like and how that's going to play out in the fall once kids come back inside the school building. So I feel as though, certainly Lynn should have the authority to kind of adjust accordingly and keep the board in a kind of active conversation for sure. Like I would like to know what the new recommendations are coming, from the state are and how we're going to adjust in real time. But I know that like last year, decisions had to be made like immediately sometimes, and we don't always have time to have a big discussion about it. And that is why we have a superintendent.
Are we taking, sorry, are we taking questions from the chat?
Oh, certainly, I don't see anything on the screen. Mrs. Board discussion, we can circle back at the end if people have.
The question was also, it was related to what you were saying about what happens in elementary schools. Like basically when younger kids are able to get the shot, how can
We don't know.
That was the issue. We have no guidance on how that happens. I would echo in the fact that last year we got whiplash, right? And so as far as guidance, it would change from day to day. And as a board, I feel like we have to still give you the authority to make those decisions. As a school, we often follow guidance from the health department around head lice. We follow guidance from the Department of Health about many things that go on in this building, and they're not necessarily mandated, but there's still guidance that we follow. And so I feel that if you're going to make decisions, you have to follow the guidance, but I do not support being more restrictive. And if it's less restrictive, I feel the same that you should talk to the board about it. That's my 2 cents.
What happens if there is no guidance?
Yeah, that's where we go, right? Because that's what I feel like happens is they say this is the issue, but there's no guidance. And so we're left making these decisions for families and kids. And as you pointed out, I'm no doctor. I'm a teacher. I had to live in a mask all year. My students had to live in a mask all year. I get it. I totally get it. My kids had to wear a mask all year. I completely get it. But in the same sense is, I don't know if I can carry on my shoulders if something were to happen to the kids in our building as a result of not following guidance. That's just where I have to sit on that one, I think. But if there's no guidance, I have no idea.
Well, can we flash back to last year when there were points in time where there was no guidance? What I did was coordinate with other colleagues to try to make sense, consult with public health experts to try to make the best decision that we could. And I always informed the board when there was something like that. Does that feel like it's something that you would want me to continue to do this year? I think the other pieces are nurses. Our nurses have been a tremendous asset. I can't say that enough. During the pandemic, what they lifted on last year was monumental. And they often have another avenue of information that I don't have because they have the Vermont State nurses, and they get things more directly from the Department of Health than I do. So I get the education stuff, so that the decisions never made in isolation. It was always in consultation with other relevant leaders.
I mean, I think that's what we'll have to do, is if there's no specific guidance, then we draw on the appropriate resources that we have in the organization or at the state level. You did that less last year, I suppose, because it was so regimented and kind of contained and
it was more
controlled.
the details. It wasn't the big ideas. It wasn't the big decisions. It's the details. And then, this year, the difference is the big decisions are not regulated, right? So there's more discussion and more thought that has to go into the big decisions, but then it's still going to be figuring out all the logistics.
So what are folks thinking then as far as Lynn having the authority to make these kind of real-time decisions moving forward as they relate to COVID-19 in communication with the board, but based on the guidance and the recommendations that we're getting from the relevant agencies at the level of the states? Because otherwise otherwise we
I
can't
you
have
have
enough
to.
board meetings to ourselves
Right.
kind of weigh in on that. That's going to be an impossible task otherwise.
I mean, even folks spoke to confusion. I feel like it would just lead to far more confusion if Lynn was waiting for us to understand, figure out, translate, when in fact, I think it makes sense that you have that authority. That's just my 2 cents.
What would the board feel about putting a sunset provision in the authority? So we have a sunset, so this authority expires at our December meeting, at which point we'll have a discussion about how things are going, how things are working, and then reevaluate at that point in time.
I think that makes sense. I like that.
That's a good idea.
So I'll put that on the agenda for your
Oh.
December board.
Sorry, can you repeat that? It's
So,
Yeah.
on the Zoom call.
oh, you're right.
Oh, sorry. I wondered what the board felt about the sunset provision, which the superintendent's authority to do this would expire at our December supervisory union board meeting, at which time we'll have a discussion about how things are going, whether we want to renew this authority or not, how things are going.
Did you hear that, Emily? Okay.
So I mean, I think that's a that would be fine to add to this. So, and we do need a motion.
Mhm.
So we would be making a motion to grant Lynn the authority to make real-time decisions related to COVID-19 as per recommendations from the Department of Health and the Agency of Education and the state.
Hey, Mary,
Yeah.
you want to ask Emily if she has anything to add?
Oh, I thought she said she was okay.
Oh, maybe
She had heard, but I don't know if she wants to add.
Emily, do you have anything to add? I'm sorry, I did not mean to ignore you.
No, that's okay. I feel bad that I have to Zoom again. No, I like what Rick said. I like the conversation. I think we all, like, we agreed fast about what was going on with science about last year, and Lynn did a superb job of making decisions on the fly and communicating those decisions effectively. I felt that, I mean, I'm a parent, my kids are safe in school, and I absolutely trust her because I was doing that.
Thanks, Emily. So that's the motion on the table. I can repeat it if that's helpful, or we could refine it if anyone wants to further discuss.
What was the motion on?
So the motion on the table is to grant Lynn the authority to make real-time decisions as they relate to COVID-19 practices in the schools based on the latest public health guidance and recommendations coming from the the Agency of Education, the Department of Health, and the state of Vermont.
Until our December meeting.
Until our December meeting, at which time that will sunset and we will reevaluate as we head into the second part of the school year.
Almost.
So all in favor by roll. Emily?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Kat?
Aye.
Polly?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Okay. Anything further?
So, I was just gonna share communication planning, so
Yeah.
this will help me to know what my next steps need to be, so I'm gonna work through, I have a kind of a blank template for my communication, so I'm gonna work tomorrow to try to get that finalized, and my goal will be to try to hit the send button to all of our stakeholders on Friday. And we'll probably do later Friday, but Friday.
Are you going to put out something about the flexible pathways, the virtual?
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. Let me just drop that note down. So at last night's ERUSD board meeting, Gabrielle Lumber, the principal for the Flexible Pathways Academy, she shared where we are right now currently with our Flexible Pathways Academy, which is a completely virtual option for students that we were able to pilot through the Agency of Education. I think to my knowledge right now, I think we're the only system that was approved to pilot this. I think there are some other systems that are looking to pull something together now. So she was giving us a status update of how many students were enrolled, and when asked at last night's meeting about, she made a comment about, I've been hearing from a lot of parents, and so we asked the question of are they is this related to masking, and she said yes, and we asked, is it because of they're opposed or in support of, and her response was both. So I do think that no matter where we were to land on this decision, we would have some more students choosing to exercise that option to use that flexible pathways for right now, and then we have put together some procedures for when students want to come back into the public school. So I wonder if there will be some parents that feel so strongly about this that they'll choose that option for now, and then when we're able to be less restrictive in the schools, choose to come back in physically. Is there anything else that you want me to bring up about that?
Anything further? All right. And future agenda items, we have our meeting next week, so next Wednesday.
Right.
I don't know if anyone can, we have a few, obviously there are things already on the agenda for next week, but is anyone thinking? Certainly by then we'll be able to discuss what Lynn has pushed out to the community. We may have people coming to discuss once it's kind of a known quantity, because we're talking a lot of hypotheticals right now.
Right.
Okay. So then I need a motion to adjourn if we're all set. All in favor? Emily?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Polly?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
Mary is an aye. Thank you so much, folks.